The summer of 1812 came to Ashwarren like a stranger admitted at last, for the great Honeystone house had kept its shutters half drawn and its iron gates barred through a whole year of mourning, and on this one bright morning the Duke had ordered them thrown open to the county again. The gravel court lay white and blinding under a cloudless sky, the fountains loosed, the long windows unshuttered, and along the raked stones stood the finest people in 3 parishes, come to see whether grief had truly loosened its hold on the house of Ashwarren, or whether they had merely been let in to look at a ruin. At the center of them all stood a little girl of 5 in pale muslin, and every lady there wanted her. "Come to me, sweeting," said one, bending with her arms held wide. "Come, let me look at you. Aren't you the very picture of your poor dear mother?" "She is an angel," said another, and reached. "An absolute angel. Come, darling, come to your Aunt Sowerby. There's a good girl." The child did not go. She stood rigid among the silks and the reaching gloved hands, her small face turning from one to another. And the county held its breath, because the county knew what came next. They had all heard it. For a year the Duke of Ashwarren's only child had not spoken a word, would let no living soul touch her, had clawed and screamed her way through every fine nurse and governess her father could hire from London. She was, the drawing rooms had decided, broken past mending. As cursed and cold as the man who had made her, and nearest of all, in dove-blue silk that had cost more than a curate earned in a year, stood the widow, Mrs. Cassandra Vane, who meant before the season was out to be the next Duchess of Ashwarren, and who now sank into a graceful crouch and opened her arms as though the whole morning had been arranged for this. "Adelaide," said Mrs. Vane, warm and clear, so that all could hear the tenderness in it. "Adelaide, my love, come to me." The child looked at the beautiful woman with the outstretched arms. Then she screamed. It was not a child's ordinary crying. It was a high, tearing sound that stopped every conversation on the court and sent a flock of rooks up off the roof line. And before a single lady could close her fingers upon her, the girl had twisted from all of them at once and was running. She ran the length of the sunlit gravel, past the fountains, past the astonished silk and the fallen fans, her small shoes flying, and she flung herself against the knees of a woman standing quite alone at the edge of the crowd. A woman no one there had troubled to look at once all morning, and she buried her face in that woman's neck and gripped 2 fistfuls of plain gray cloth, and would not let go. The woman in the twice-worn dove gray gown went down onto the gravel to hold her. She did not smile, or perform, or glance about to see who watched. She simply gathered the shaking child against her and bent her head over the small one's hair, and was, plainly and entirely, there, and on the steps above them, arrested mid-stride, with his own hand fallen open at his side, the master of Ashwarren forgot how to breathe. He had stopped hoping. That was the truth he carried like a stone. Since the day his wife died, he had watched his daughter fight off every soul who came near her, had stood in the nursery doorway while grown women wept and gave notice, had begun in his private heart to believe the county's verdict that the child was lost, and he had lost her. He knew every hired face that had failed. He did not, in that first instant, even know the name of the one his daughter had chosen. He knew only that his little girl, who flinched from his own hand, was clinging to a poor woman in a mended gown as though she were the last solid thing in a drowning world, and that something in his chest had cracked clean down the middle in front of the entire county, and that he could not have stirred a single foot to save his life. Her name was Mary Ann, and she was 26, and she was nobody. She was a distant cousin of the late Duchess, orphaned young and left without a shilling, taken into Ashwarn the previous winter on the understanding that she was to be grateful for her board and to make no further claims upon anyone. She had no wages. She had 2 gowns, both grey, both turned once already at the seams, and she had been given, because no one else in the house would keep it, the single task that every paid servant had refused, to sit through the long nights with the screaming child. She had not tried to win the girl. That was the thing none of them understood, then or after. The nurses had tried, with sweets and songs and sudden bright voices, and the child had bitten and howled and driven them out. Marianne had simply come, every night, and sat in the dark by the little bed, and stayed. When the child screamed, she did not seize her or shush her. She said, quietly, "I am here. I am not going anywhere," and she was still there in the gray of the morning. Night after night after night, the one fixed point in the ruin of that small life, the only thing that had not left. The child had learned her the way one learns that the floor will hold. Now, on the gravel, an old woman came down the steps faster than her years should have allowed. This was the Dowager Duchess, the Duke's blunt and formidable mother, who had never once believed the county's tidy verdict on her granddaughter, and who now planted her stick in the stones and looked down at the woman and the child with fierce bright eyes. "Well," said the Dowager, to the whole silent court, "it seems the child has better sense than the lot of you. Get up off the ground, girl. You'll take a chill. No keep the child. Plainly she means to keep you." Marianne rose, the little girl still fastened to her, still hiding her face, and she looked for one uncertain moment toward the steps, toward the tall man standing there with his open hand and his broken face, and she could not read what she saw in it. She dropped her eyes and held the child and waited, as she had learned to wait, to be told what was required of her. The county could not look away. Neither, from that morning, could the Duke. They had thought her nothing. An incorruptible witness had, in a single unrehearsed instant, certified her worth before the whole collective that had dismissed her, and the collective had seen it. And there was no unseeing it now. The child would not be parted from the woman in gray. She screamed if another hand reached for her and quieted only against that mended shoulder, and a duke may dismiss a poor relation on a whim, but he cannot dismiss the one person his motherless heir has chosen to live for. Whatever the drawing rooms whispered, Marianne could not now be sent away. "You will stay in the nursery wing," the Duke said to her that evening. He had sought her out himself, which he did for no one, and he stood in the doorway as if he did not quite trust himself to come further in. "You will have wages, and a maid under you, and whatever the child needs, you have only to name it. I do not understand what you have done. I should like you to know that I do not expect you to explain it. I have not done anything, Your Grace," Marianne said. "I only stayed." "Yes," he said, after a silence that went on a beat too long, "so I begin to see." He regarded her then in a way she was too tired and too wary to read, a look that rested a fraction longer than a master's look should, and he went away down the dark corridor. And Marianne sat down by the small bed where the child had at last fallen asleep, still holding the gray cloth in one fist, and she pressed her own thumb hard against her palm, the way she did when she did not dare to hope, and she told herself that a warm room and wages were more than she had yesterday, and that she must not want anything beyond them. She wanted, of course. That was the danger. But she had long practice in not letting it show. The season turned, and the house that had forgotten how to be a house began, very slowly, to remember. It began in the nursery, because everything now began in the nursery. On the first night that Adelaide slept the whole night through without waking on a scream, Marianne came down at dawn gray, faced with joy, and found the Duke already at the foot of the stairs, still dressed from the night before, and she understood that he had not slept either, that he had been listening to the silence and not daring to believe it. She slept, Marianne said. All night? All night, Your Grace. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, in the flat, careful voice of a man who does not permit himself much, "Thank you." And it was plain that the two small words had cost him something, and that he did not know how to pay it any better. After that, he came to the nursery, not as a duke inspecting his household, but as a father who had been shut out of a room for a year and had found the door unexpectedly open. He came in the evenings, at first only to the doorway, and stood while Marianne read to the child in a low voice, and the child, who would not sit on his knee, would sit on Marianne's and permit him to be there. It was a small permission. To the master of that silent house, who had taught himself to want for nothing, it was an ocean. She laughed today, Marianne told him one evening. At the kitchen cat, it had got itself into a flour barrel and came out a ghost of a cat, and she laughed until she had the hiccups. She laughed, he repeated, as though the word were foreign. A proper laugh, loud and unlovely and wonderful. I have not heard her laugh, the Duke said quietly, since her mother died. You will, said Marianne. She is not broken, Your Grace. She was only waiting to be sure the world would not go away again. Children can tell. They know who stays. He looked at her across the lamplit room, across the sleeping child, and Marianne saw that she had said too much, spoken above her station, and she braced for the cold word that would put her back in her place. It did not come. And you? The Duke said. Do you stay? I have nowhere else to be, Your Grace, she answered, which was the safe truth and not the whole one, and she bent her head to the book so that he would not see her face. It became a habit, the talking. He would come and stay after the child slept, and they would speak in low voices by the dying fire, and the Duke, who spoke to no one, found he could not stop speaking to her. They tell me my wife was much loved, he said one night, abruptly, as though the thought had been waiting a year for a room quiet enough to say it in. In the county, I mean. The great ladies come and sigh over her memory and tell me how the whole world grieved her. Do you believe them? No, he said. I think the great ladies grieved a duchess. I do not think they knew Helena at all. The servants knew her, Marianne said. You want the truth of it, Your Grace? Ask below stairs, not above. The scullery girl still keeps a ribbon your wife gave her the winter her mother was ill. The old gardener will not let anyone else prune the white roses because your duchess showed him how. That is who remembers her, not the ladies with the fans. The people she was kind to when there was nothing in it for her. He was quiet a long moment. No one has told me that, he said. In a year, no one has told me a single true thing about her. They tell me what they think a grieving duke wishes to hear. I am not very good at that, said Marianne. The wishing, to hear. I never learned it. Poverty is a poor school for flattery. Yes, said the Duke, and there was something almost like a smile in it. I had noticed. She should not have liked that he had noticed. She liked it far too much, and she pressed her thumb into her palm, and she said nothing. The dowager took to the child before she took to the woman, which was her way. She came up to the nursery one wet afternoon and sat herself down without ceremony and held out a small carved horse. This was your father's, she told Adelaide, who watched her with grave dark eyes from the safety of Marianne's lap. He was a horror at your age, all knees and temper, and he loved this wretched horse past all sense. You may have it. A house wants a child in it who breaks things. Yours has been far too quiet. The child did not take the horse from the old woman's hand. She reached instead for Marianne, and Marianne took the horse and gave it across, and only then did the small fingers close on it. The dowager watched this careful transaction with her sharp, bright eyes and said nothing until the child had climbed down to play on the hearthrug. She trusts you to test the world for her first, the old woman said. That is what you are to her, the one who goes ahead and finds it safe. She looked at Marianne shrewdly. Do you know what my son sees when he watches you do that? I do not presume to know what his grace sees. No, you would not presume. That is half your charm and the whole of your trouble. The dowager pushed herself up on her stick. I buried a husband, and I have watched my son bury a wife, and I will tell you the one thing I have learned about grief in a long and disagreeable life. It does not end because someone tells you it should. It ends the day you find you are looking forward to the morning again. She paused at the door. He has begun looking forward to the mornings. I should like to know who taught him that. She was gone before Marianne could find a way to say that she had taught him nothing, that she had only stayed, that staying was the single thing she knew how to do. The talking crept, without either of them naming it, out of the nursery and into the rest of the house. He began to send for her in the evenings, to the library, on the pretext of some question about the child that could easily have waited for morning. You sent for me, Your Grace. I did. Sit. You are always standing, as though you expect to be sent away between one sentence and the next. It is a habit of the poor, Your Grace. We learn to be easy to remove. Not from this room, he said. Read to me. My eyes are tired, and you have a good voice, and I am weary of my own thoughts for company. What would you have me read? Whatever you would choose for yourself, if the whole shelf were yours and no one were watching. She chose a book of poems, and read, and he sat with his eyes closed and listened, and when she stopped he did not open them at once. You did not choose the fashionable thing, he said, or the improving thing. You chose the one you love. You told me to. I did. I find I like knowing what you love. I have spent a great many years in rooms full of people telling me what they thought I wished to hear. You do not do it, and I did not know how starved of the plain truth I was until you came and spoke it in my house. That is not a compliment most men would pay a poor relation, Your Grace. I am not paying you a compliment, he said. I am telling you a fact. The two are not the same, and I think you of all people know it. He leaned forward, and the fire moved on his face. Tell me a fact in return. An honest one. Are you happy here? She considered the question as though it might be a trap, because in her experience such questions usually were. I am useful here, she said at last. I have not been useful anywhere before. It is a great deal more than I ever looked to have. That is not what I asked. No, Your Grace. But it is what I am able to answer. He held her eyes a long moment, and something in his still face gentled. One day, he said, I mean to ask you a question you will answer plainly, and I mean to like the answer. But not tonight. Tonight you will only read me one more, and then you will go up to my daughter, who will not sleep unless she knows where you are. Upstairs the child was proof of everything. Adelaide, who had been silent a whole year, now hoarded words like a miser and spent them all at once. What is that one? She demanded of Marianne, pointing at the ceiling. That is a cornice, my love. And that one? A candle. You know a candle. I know a candle, Adelaide agreed with satisfaction. I am saying them so they cannot go away again. If I say a thing, it stays. Grandmama says I talk enough for the whole county and half of the next one. Your grandmama is right, as she generally is. Papa cried when I said cornice. Did he? Said Marianne, very carefully. He said it was the finest word anyone ever said to him. The child frowned, working at a thought too large for her. Why would cornice make Papa cry? Because for a long time he was afraid he would never hear you say any word at all, Marianne said. And then you said a great many, and now he cannot be sad about it, even the silly ones. Some tears are only happiness that has run out of room. Adelaide absorbed this. Then I will say more of them, she decided. So he runs out of room every day. And she said cornice 11 more times until she fell asleep on the 12th, and Marianne sat in the dark and understood that she had already lost the sensible war she had declared upon her own heart, and that she had lost it some weeks ago, and that she had not the smallest wish to win it back. The near thing happened at the turn of the summer, and it happened, as everything did, over the child. Adelaide had a fever, a small, ordinary childhood fever that nonetheless emptied the house of its wits, and Marian sat up 2 nights with her. And on the second night, the Duke would not go to bed either, but sat opposite across the little cot, and somewhere past 2 in the morning the fever broke, and the child slept clean and cool at last. In the flood of relief they had both reached at the same instant to smooth the damp hair from the small face, and their hands met over the sleeping child, and neither of them drew back. The clock on the mantel counted it. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. His hand was over hers, warm and quite still, and Marianne looked up and found him already looking at her, and the whole grieving house seemed to hold its breath around them. You should sleep, Your Grace, she said, and did not move her hand. She chose you, the Duke said low. In front of the entire county, she chose you. Do you know, I have wanted to say something to you since that morning, and I have not had the courage of my own daughter. He stopped. His thumb moved once across her knuckles. She chose you before I dared to, and the child stirred and murmured, and the moment folded itself away, and Marianne drew her hand back and stood and busied herself with the basin, her heart going like a hare, and the Duke did not finish the sentence. He did not finish it for a long time, but it hung in the air of the nursery after that, the unfinished shape of it. And they both knew the words that had not come, and the not saying of them was louder than any declaration. She told herself it was gratitude. A man was grateful, that was all. Gratitude wore a warm face, and she must not mistake it for anything that would break her when it was withdrawn. She had been overlooked her whole life, and she knew the arithmetic of it. Poor relations did not become duchesses. Poor relations became convenient until they became inconvenient, and then they became gone. She would love the child, who was permitted to her, and she would not let herself love the father, who was not. It was a very sensible resolution. She kept it for nearly a fortnight. Then came the first whispered word. Adelaide had not spoken in a year. Not one word, in all the months of screaming and silence. And on an ordinary gray morning, while Marianne plaited the small dark hair before the glass, the child looked at their 2 faces in the mirror and said, quite clearly, "Stay." Marianne went very still. "What did you say, my love? Stay," said Adelaide again, and turned in her lap and put both small hands flat against Marianne's cheeks and looked at her with her mother's grave eyes. "Stay, stay, stay." "I will stay," Marianne whispered, and the tears came and she could not stop them. "I will stay. I promise you, I am not going anywhere." She had not known the Duke stood in the doorway. She could not have guessed he had heard his daughter's first word in a year, and that it had not been Papa, and that he found he did not mind, that the only thing he minded was the fierce and sudden certainty in his own chest that he could not let this woman leave his house, not ever, not for any reason the world could invent. But there was one who had counted on becoming a duchess, and who had watched all of this with a cold and rising fury, and who now understood exactly what she stood to lose. Mrs. Cassandra Vane had come to Ashwarren a widow, with a small fortune and a large ambition. She had spent a careful year making herself indispensable to the county's good opinion of the grieving Duke, and she had assumed, as everyone had assumed, that the broken child would in time be sent away to some quiet establishment, and that a beautiful, sensible second wife would take the vacant place at Ashwarren's table. She had not counted on the child mending. She had not counted, above all, on a penniless gray nobody stepping in front of her in the child's affections, and, she now saw plainly, in the Duke's. She chose her moment with care. She came to the dowager's morning room where Marianne was mending, and she sat, and she smiled her warm public smile, and she said, "I wonder, Miss Marianne, whether you have quite considered your position." "I consider it every day, Mrs. Vane," said Marianne. "It is not the sort of position one is allowed to forget. How well you put it. You are a poor relation given a great deal of license, and the county is beginning to talk. A single woman, so very much in a widowed duke's company at all hours, in the nursery, on the terrace." Mrs. Vane spread her hands. "I say this as your friend. It will not end kindly for a girl in your situation. It never does. The Duke will marry where his rank requires, and you will be turned out with your reputation in tatters. And there will not be a respectable house in the country that will take you. I could spare you that. I could find you a comfortable place, far from here, before the talk hardens into fact." "You are very generous," said Marianne, "to be so anxious for my comfort so very far away." The smile did not waver, but something behind it did. "Think on it," said Mrs. Vane, and rose. "You are not a foolish woman. You know what you are, and you know what you are not. Do not let a child's tantrum on a gravel court persuade you that you are anything more." She was wrong about only one thing. Marianne did know exactly what she was, but she had made a promise to a little girl in front of a mirror, and she was, whatever else the world might say of her, a woman who kept her promises. And so she did not pack her box, and she refused the comfortable place far away, and in that refusal she signed, though no one told her so, the paper that would nearly destroy her. Because Mrs. Vane, refused, did not retreat. She schemed. It began with a dismissed nurse named Mrs. Foss, a hard, bitter woman who had been turned out of Ashwarren the previous autumn for cruelty, and who nursed her grievance like a coal. Mrs. Vane found her lodgings in the village and money for her purse and words for her mouth. "You need only sign it," Mrs. Vane told her. "A plain statement of what you saw, that the gray woman keeps the child docile with a sleeping draught, that the fits and the silence were her doing, dosing the little heir into stupor to make herself the only soul who could manage her. It is a small thing to sign, and there is £50 in it, and the pleasure of seeing that house pay for how it used you. And if I am asked how I saw it, being turned out these 10 months, you will not be asked," said Mrs. Vane. "The bottle will do the asking." For there was to be a bottle. Mrs. Vane purchased it herself, a brown apothecary's bottle of laudanum draught, and one evening when the nursery was empty she went up on her indispensable errands and set it far at the back of Marianne's own small shelf, behind the mended linen, where a searcher would find it and a keeper never would. And then she went to the county's leading families, and to the Farleys, whose daughter Miss Harcourt had a great fortune and no particular character, and she arranged that a betrothal between the Duke and Miss Harcourt should be spoken of as good as settled, and to be announced, fittingly, at the great assembly that would close the season. At that same assembly, Mrs. Vane arranged one thing more. A magistrate would be present, and a poor relation would be taken up before the whole county for the endangerment of a ducal heir, and the child would be removed from her corrupting care, and the grey nobody would be gone from Ashwarren by dawn, with a gale cell waiting, and the beautiful sensible widow would be on hand to comfort a betrayed and grateful duke. It was, she thought, very neatly done. The night before the assembly, the Duke found Marianne on the terrace. The season's last warmth lay over the dark garden, and the child slept above them, and he came and stood beside her at the balustrade, closer than a master stands. "You are troubled," he said. "There is talk of an announcement tomorrow, Your Grace, of a betrothal." She kept her voice even. "I only wish to know where the child and I are to stand, so that I may prepare her. She does not do well with sudden changes. And what have you heard of this betrothal? That it is as good as settled. That Miss Harcourt is a great heiress and very suitable, and that a duke must marry where his rank requires." She had handed him his own worst fear back in his own words, and had no notion she had done it. "Look at me," he said. She looked. "I have settled nothing. I will settle nothing that is not my own free choosing. Do you understand me? Whatever you hear tomorrow, whatever room it is announced in, I have chosen no one." His hand rose as if to touch her face, and stopped, an inch away, near enough that she felt the warmth of it. "There is a thing I have been trying to say to you since a morning on the gravel. I have been a coward about it. Tomorrow I mean to stop being a coward." "Your Grace Adrian," he said. "My name. I should like, just once, to hear you say it, before the whole county tells me tomorrow whom I am to marry." But she did not say it, because a footman came with a message, and the moment folded away, as their moments always did, and she went up to the child with the almost touch still burning on her cheek, and the unsaid words hanging between them, and none of them guessed that Mrs. Vane had already lit the fuse, and that by this hour tomorrow Marianne would be standing before a magistrate accused of poisoning the child she loved. The assembly filled the long gallery of Ashwarren, with light and silk and every important person in the county, and Marianne stood near the nursery stair, with the sleeping child's hand warm in hers. And she watched the season's whole glittering world come in, and she waited to be told where she might stand. She did not have to wait long. Mrs. Vane crossed the floor to the Duke, and her voice was pitched to Carrie, and the music faltered as heads began to turn. "Your Grace," she said, "before there is any announcement of happy things tonight, there is a grievous matter I can no longer keep silent upon, for the sake of the child. It concerns the woman you have trusted with your only heir." "Choose your next words with great care, madam," the Duke said. "I choose them in sorrow. Your Grace, this woman has been drugging your daughter." A gasp moved through the gallery like wind through wheat. The fits, the silence, the years of terror, and then the sudden calm, the sudden devotion, the child who will go to no one but her. It was not love that made the little heir cling to her. It was laudanum. She has dosed that child into helplessness to make herself the only hand that could quiet her, and so to work her way into this house and, Your Grace forgive me, into your regard. "That is a lie," said Marianne, and her voice was not loud, but it carried to the last corner of the room. Every word of it is a lie. Is it? Mrs. Vane raised her hand, and the bitter dismissed nurse stepped forward with a folded paper. This good woman nursed the child before you came. She has set down under her own hand what she saw. I saw the gray one measure the drops, said Mrs. Foss, reciting, morning and night, into the child's milk. I said nothing for fear of my place, and it has weighed on my soul. And here it is written. And in the girl's own chamber, said Mrs. Vane, turning to the magistrate who stood grave beside her, on the shelf behind her linen, your worship will find a bottle of the very draught. I would stake my name upon it. Send a man up, and let the house see what manner of creature has been permitted to raise its heir. A footman was sent. The gallery held its breath. He came back down the great stair, with a brown apothecary's bottle held out before him like a dead thing, and he gave it into the magistrate's hand, and the magistrate turned it and read the label, and his face went hard. Laudanum draught, he said. Found where the lady said, Miss, this is a very serious matter. Endangerment of an heir is no small charge. Have you anything to say before I do my duty? Marianne felt the whole county's eyes upon her, the fans lowered, the mouths already shaping the word they had always wanted to say of her, and she thought of the promise she had made before a mirror, and she lifted her chin. I have this to say. She began. I never in my life she need not defend herself. The dowager's stick struck the floor like a gavel, and the old woman came through the parting crowd with the physician at her side and a fury in her that silenced even Mrs. Vane. My son's household will not watch a decent woman hounded on the word of a dismissed servant and a bottle that walked itself onto a shelf. Dr. Merrick, tell them what you told me this morning. Gladly, Your Grace. The physician was a spare, precise man, and he spoke to the room like one reading a ledger. I have attended the child at Ashwarren these 6 months. Had she been given laudanum in any quantity, morning and night, I should have seen it plain the pinned eye, the slowed heart, the poor color, the failing appetite. I have seen none of it. I have seen a child grow rosy and loud and well. On my oath as her physician, that child has not been drugged. She has been mended. There is a difference, and I am trained to know it. A physician may be deceived, said Mrs. Vane. He may, the dowager agreed. So let us not rest on the physician. Let us rest on the apothecary's book. She held out her hand, and Dr. Merrick placed in it a heavy ledger. There is only one apothecary in the village, and by law he sets down every purchase of laudanum, the buyer's name in his own hand, and the date beside it. I sent for his book this afternoon. It makes very instructive reading. Shall I read it to the county? Or would you rather I did not, Mrs. Vane? The widow's face had begun to change. I cannot see what a shopkeeper's scribbling, then I will read it. The dowager opened the ledger and found her place and read in a clear, carrying voice. The draught in that bottle was sold once this season, not to Miss Marianne, whose name does not appear in these pages at all. It was bought a fortnight past, and paid for in coin, and the name the apothecary set down beside it, in his own hand. Is Mrs. Cassandra Vane. The silence in the gallery was absolute. He will swear to it, the dowager went on, over the first rising murmur. He remembers the sale, for a fine lady does not commonly come herself for such a thing. You bought the poison you say she used. You planted the bottle you had a footman fetch. And this paper, she plucked the folded confession from Mrs. Foss's slack hand was signed for £50 by a woman turned out of this house for cruelty 10 months before the events she claims to have witnessed. Isn't that so, Mrs. Foss? You may lie to me, but there is a magistrate at your elbow, and the coin came from her purse. Mrs. Foss looked at the magistrate, and at the widow, and at the £50 already spent, and her nerve broke. She paid me, the nurse said. She wrote the words, and I signed them. God forgive me, I never saw the girl give the child anything but bread and milk, and her own 2 arms. The lady said there was no harm in it. The lady said no one would ask. And then, into that ringing quiet, came the smallest witness of all. The child had woken at the noise and come to the top of the stair in her nightgown. And she came down it one careful step at a time with a fistful of papers, and she crossed the whole shining floor exactly as she had crossed the gravel a season before, past all the fine-reaching people, and she gave the papers up to her grandmother and then fastened both arms about Marianne's gray skirts. "What are these, child?" the dowager asked gently. "My pictures," said Adelaide, in her small, clear, rediscovered voice, and the county that had thought her mute for a year went very still to hear it. "The one who stays." The dowager turned the drawings so the room could see them. A child's drawings, crude and true, the same figure in every one, a woman in gray by a small bed, the same gray shape holding a candle, and again with her arms flung out and a little girl running into them, and over the crowd of them, in a child's laborious letters, one word copied a dozen times: "Stay." "There is your witness, your worship," said the dowager. "She cannot be bribed, she cannot be flattered, and she has never in her life been able to lie. She drew who soothed her before she could speak to tell us. I think the matter is decided." The magistrate closed the ledger. "It is decided," he said heavily. "Miss Marianne, you leave this room without a stain upon you. Mrs. Vane, you and I will have a great deal to discuss, and none of it here." It was then that the Duke stepped forward, and the room turned to him, for he had not spoken through all of it, and they saw that his face was undone. "Everyone in this gallery came tonight to hear an announcement," he said. "I will give you one. It is not the one that was arranged for me. Mrs. Vane, you and the Farleys may take your settled understanding and your heiress, and leave my house, and you will find your names struck from every list at Ashwarn from this night. That is the whole of my business with you." He turned from her as if she had ceased to exist, and he crossed to Marianne, and before the county, he took her hand. "I have a thing to finish saying," he told her, low, but the gallery was so silent that all of it carried. "I began it over a sick child's bed, and a footman stopped me. And I began it on the terrace, and a message stopped me. And I will not be stopped tonight. My daughter chose you on the gravel in front of all these people when she could not yet say a word. She chose you before I had the courage to. And I have spent a whole season being braver than a duke and more cowardly than a child of 5, and I am done with it. I chose you the morning you knelt on the stones and did not perform your kindness for anyone watching. I have chosen you every night since across a candle and a sleeping child. I am choosing you now, publicly and legally, and without one word of apology to anyone in this room." He drew a breath. "Marianne, say my name, only that." And she looked at the man who had been given nothing, and had schooled himself to hope for nothing, and at the child fastened to her skirts, and at the whole watching county that had once decided she was no one at all, and she found she did not care in the least what any of them thought. "Adrian," she said. "Again," he said, unsteadily, "I choose it too. Adrian, freely, and before all of them. I put my hand into yours." And she did. A year later, the gravel court at Ashwarn was full of light again, but this time no one was waiting to be judged. The gates stood open because the family liked them open. The fountains ran because a child had asked for them. And across the sunlit grass a little girl of 6 was running flat out after a spaniel puppy and shrieking with a joy that had nothing torn in it at all. "She will fall," said the dowager comfortably, from her chair in the shade. "She will fall, and she will get up, and she will tell us all about it at great length," said Marianne, who was watching from the terrace with her husband's arm about her. "She has a great deal to say now. She is making up for the lost year at the top of her lungs." "Adelaide," the Duke called, "do not drown my dog in the fountain." "I am not drowning him," the child called back, breathless and delighted. "I am teaching him to swim. There is a difference. Dr. Merrick said so about me, and he was right, so it is true about dogs as well." "You cannot argue with that," the dowager observed. "No one can argue with her," said Marianne. "It is the great trouble with teaching a silent child to speak. She has opinions now, and she shares them." "Good," said the Duke, and the word had a whole year of gratitude folded into it. "Let her have opinions until the roof comes down." I spent 12 months praying to hear her voice. I will not now complain of the quantity. The county, which had once been so sure of everything, had adjusted itself to the facts with the speed of people who wished to seem always to have known. The great ladies who had reached for the child on the gravel now called the new Duchess a wonder, and forgot they had ever called her anything else. Mrs. Cassandra Vane did not call at all. She had gone abroad within the month, to a warm and distant country where her history was not known, and the county mentioned her seldom, and the family never. "Do you know what your grandmother said to me on my wedding morning?" Marianne asked the child, who had abandoned the puppy and come to lean against her knee. "Tell me," she said. "A house wants a child in it who breaks things. And that I was to see to it you broke a great many." "I broke a jug yesterday," Adelaide offered. "I heard. The whole West Wing heard. I was helping." "You were helping," Marianne agreed gravely, and smoothed the dark hair back from the small bright face and did not have to press her thumb into her palm any longer. Because she had stopped being afraid to want the thing she now simply had. She wore blue that morning, a deep soft blue that she had chosen herself from a whole bolt of colors, because her husband had said, "You will never wear gray again unless you love it, and I do not think you love it." And she had found that she did not. The 2 gray gowns, turned and mended and worn thin through the worst year of her life, were folded away at the bottom of a cedar chest. She did not throw them out. They had held a frightened child through 100 nights. They had earned their rest. But she did not wear them, and she never missed them, and when she opened the chest sometimes and saw the pale gray folds, she felt only a great tenderness for the woman she had been, who had expected nothing of the world and had gone on staying anyway. "You are far away," said the Duke, quietly, beside her. "I am only remembering a morning on this court. Everyone reaching for her, and her running the whole way to me, and I could not think why." "I could think why," he said. "I knew it before I knew your name." She had found the one person in all that crowd who wanted nothing from her but her safety. He turned Marianne toward him. "So had I. I only took longer to be brave about it. You were brave enough in the end. A child of 5 shamed me into it." He smiled, the full unguarded smile that a year ago he had not owned. "I have told her she may put that on my monument. Here lies a duke, outdone in courage by his daughter, aged 5. She will hold you to it. She holds me to everything," he said, and looked out at the girl now, rolling in the grass with the puppy, loud and unlovely and wonderful. And his eyes were wet and he did not trouble to hide it. "I chose you, Marian, in front of all of them, and I would choose you again in front of 10 times as many. But she chose you first. I have made my peace with being second in that. It is the best thing I have ever come second in." "Then we are agreed," said Marianne, "for I chose the both of you, and I would not undo it for any fortune in the world." The dowager, from her chair, refused to be left out of a tender moment she could improve upon. "When you two have quite finished," she called, "there is tea, and there is a child who will eat every cake on the tray if she is not watched." "I am watching her," said the Duke. "You are watching your wife." "That is not the same thing, and the cakes are the poorer for it. Grandmamma, may I have the pink one?" Adelaide asked, arriving at a run. "You may have that pink cake when you have told your new mamma good morning as a lady ought, and not as a puppy." "Good morning, mamma," said the child. And then, because she could not help it, "May I have the pink one now?" "You may," said Marianne, laughing, "and the fault will be entirely your grandmother's, who taught you the bargain." "I teach her everything useful," the dowager agreed. "Her father teaches her poetry, which is no use to anyone, and you teach her to be kind, which is a great deal of use, but wins no arguments. Between the three of us she will be insufferable and beloved, which is the best a child can hope for." "Was Papa insufferable?" Adelaide asked, through the pink cake. "Your Papa was silent for a year, and grim for 10 before it," said the dowager. "And then a small person he had given up on ran across a courtyard to a woman in a mended gown, and taught the pair of us that we had been fools, and here we all are eating cake in the sun. So you see, my girl, it was you who mended us, and not the other way about. Do not let anyone tell you the story the wrong way round." "I like that story," Adelaide decided. "And will you tell it to your own children one day?" the dowager asked, "the right way round?" "Every single night," Adelaide promised, "until they can say it back to me, with not one word left out. That is how a person keeps a thing safe. You say it, and you say it, and then it can never go away." "She has been listening to you," the Duke murmured to his wife. "She has been listening to all of us," said Marianne. "That was always her whole trouble, and it has turned out to be her whole cure." "So do I," said the Duke quietly, and put his hand over his wife's on the warm stone, and this time there was no fever, and no crowd, and no reason on earth to draw it back, and neither of them did. The puppy escaped. The child gave chase. The dowager called for tea, and the great house of Ashwarren, which the county had once come to look at as a ruin, stood open to the summer with its shutters down and its fountains loud, and a family loud within it. And there was not, in 3 parishes, a warmer place to be. If you have stayed with this story right to its end, then I hope it has warmed the room where you are sitting, and I should love to know a little about that room. Tell me in the comments which town or city you are listening from tonight, and which moment stayed with you the longest. Was it the little girl running the length of the gravel into the only arms she trusted? Or was it the Duke, on the assembly floor, finally saying the words he had been too afraid to say? Whichever it was, I am glad you were here for it. If a quiet story told slowly is the kind of company you like on an evening such as this, do subscribe, so that the next one finds its way to you, and I will keep a candle lit for you until then. Sleep well, and be gentle with yourselves, and I will see you in the next story.